Hello, thanks for joining us. This is Full Record Jacket with me, Phil, and
Me, Ben. Hi.
so we're doing one of our discussion shows where we give you some things to think about, look up, remember, or just research and think, what are they talking about? Why do they think this is so good? Let's go on YouTube and find it. And YouTube is exactly the place to look for these things we're talking about because these are our favourite, or at least they're five good ones that we've picked out. TV performances
Yes.
by great artists.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, the main criteria for this, ideally, is that these performances were done in a TV studio as part of a television program. We're not talking about necessarily a gig or a concert that was being televised, although that we can bend the rules and maybe allow
Good,
one or
because
two
one of
amendments.
mine is, so you're going to
But
have to bend them.
we'll bend the rules. But generally, these are made for TV performances, and in many cases, the acts involved did things that were maybe a bit unexpected, or they're just extremely good performances. So, Ben, let's kick off with your first one.
My first one, Phil, comes from the 10th of June, 1995. So I'd only just left school then. That's how long ago we're talking. But it's from Jools, Holland, and it is McAlmont and Butler, and their probably best known song, Yes. So, well, it's just I can't bring myself to describe it, Phil. It's just an absolute mammoth of sound, really. And it makes you think. You can sort of see why they disbanded after this first album. I think the sound of McAlmont and Butler, because once you've done a song like Yes, you've reached the top of the mountain, and you're only going to fall off the edge. But it's just everything. David McAlmont's voice is it's just amazing. It's just brilliant, and it's got violins, and he can hit high notes that only I can hit after a push bike accident. But yeah, it's just a great performance. And if somebody wants to go onto YouTube and watch it and tell me it isn't brilliant, then I'll meet them in the bike sheds after school and we can discuss it there. Apart from if they're really big, then we're not.
I'm trying to think now whether I saw that, and I'm pretty sure I did see McAlmont and Butler on TV. It probably was that, but I have a very hazy memory of it. So I'm going to have to go on YouTube and check that one out.
It
So
is good.
I can't offer a comment, I'm afraid, because I just don't have a strong enough recall of it.
All I can say is I never really listened to McAlmont and Butler when they were sort of around that debut period of 95. And I know they sort of brought out another album in 2002 and then split up again and then reformed and are still together from 2014. But it's one of those tracks where at the end of it you go, wow, that was amazing. And
we will put the link in the comments below.
Yes,
we'll
put all the links below.
Yeah, you can watch all of these.
But that's my top. And to be fair, all of these could have been my bet. These aren't in any particular order, but apart from probably my top one is where it should be. So that's my number 5, Phil, is McAlmont and Butler, Jools, Holland, 10th of June, 1995, with their hit single, which I don't even think went to number 1. I'm not even sure if it may have got in the top 10, but anyway, it's their version of their song, Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to go. You said what date was that it took place?
10th of June, 95.
Okay, well, I'm going to the 5th of June, 1956.
Ooh.
And I thought I'd do a historical one.
You were around then, weren't you?
Absolutely. So, yeah, I remember it well. Tuning into the Milton Berle show on American TV. How I managed to do that, I don't know. But, yeah, this was not Elvis Presley's first TV performance. He'd made several TV performances before this, and he'd been on this show before, I think. But the performance of Hound Dog is the one that really caused a lot of outrage because there was quite a bit of gyrating, particularly when he goes into the slow bit at the end, which is it's quite a different performance of Hound Dog to the record. In fact, he hadn't made the record at this point. It was the performance of the song that created demand for an Elvis record of Hound Dog, which is why they then got him into the studio quickly to make Hound Dog and Don't Be Cruel in New York. They used a New York studio, but that's by the by. But this performance is, obviously it's pretty tame by our standards today, but it caused absolute outrage at the time, and it's still pretty cool to watch. And there's an extended clip of it, which I'll put in the link, where you can get a full flavour of just how cheesy American TV was in 1956. So that's
good choice.
That's my first one. Elvis Presley, Hound Dog on the Milton Berle Show.
Yeah, that's a good choice. That's a good choice. Now, I know you discussed earlier that it had to be TV, and I didn't get that memo. So my next one is, it was on TV because it was on Glastonbury, and I didn't go. So, in a way, it's countable. We're allowed one.
Yeah, Glastonbury was effectively a TV. As far as you were concerned, that year, Glastonbury was a TV show.
In 2011, Glastonbury to me was a TV show, and because I think my son was only just born around that point as well, so I couldn't go, and I missed Pulp at Glastonbury that year, and especially their version of Disco 2000, because it's just dirty. And I've used that word before on this show. It's dirty. Jarvis is dancing like every man at the discotheque, drunk, impersonating Jarvis. Jarvis is impersonating himself and he's dancing. And it's just the fact that a man in trousers is doing what he's doing, I think deserves the utmost respect. And more than anything, every time I listen to that song, and there are a few songs from that period, especially when I see that version, it's a little bit like watching the second Train Spotting, because you realise, man, I wish it was the 90s again. But man, time does not wait for nobody. But it just makes me want to go back, Phil. The 90s were brilliant. And I know this is 2011, and he's got trousers on, and he's dancing like a Jarvis impersonator. But yeah, there's just something about it that's magical.
I need to see this. I don't think I've ever seen this. Are you saying that this tops his stage invasion of Michael Jackson?
It's up there. It's up there. I do, and he did that in trousers as well.
He doesn't do any wafting on this occasion.
There's no wafting. There's some speaker climbing at the end, and I think there's a bit at the end where he's on top of the PA, and then realises it's a little bit too far to jump down.
And that was 2011.
That was 2011. Pulp, Disco 2. To be fair, that whole gig they did at Glastonbury that year was epic. But I think it's because it was night, and you get that haze of the lights, the smoke machine, a man in trousers. I love the 90s, Phil. They should make a comeback. Well, not the early 90s, because that was rubbish. But that mid-90s, that was brilliant. So, yeah, that's my number 4, Pulp, Disco 2000, Glastonbury.
Okay, I feel that the 60s should be at least represented. I mean, I've done the 50s. Surely I've got to do the 60s. So
60s. I see where you're going.
I'm going to, I think, 1967. It came out in America, I think, a bit after it did in this country. This is The Who, and they performed on an American TV show called the Smothers Brothers TV show. The Smothers Brothers were a comedy duo who, as
sounds like a Commodore 64 game.
About them, I know very little, but that was the only thing I've ever really heard of them is in the context of The Who appearing on their show. But this clip was immortalised in the film about The Who, The Kids Are All Right, which is a documentary film that came out I think it was in the 70s. And the name of the guy who produced that documentary, I've forgotten his name, but he was a massive fan of The Who, and he got their permission to make this documentary, bringing together all the footage that was available at the time. And there were some new performances filmed at Shepperton Studios by the band. It's right near the end of Keith Moon's life, so it's also quite poignant. But the film starts off with this clip from American TV. It's in colour, and it's all the background. The set's all a little bit psychedelic and a little bit cheap in a 60s kind of way. But the notable thing about this, they performed My Generation, and at the end, there was a pyrotechnic that was supposed to go off, which I think was inside Keith Moon's bass drum, yeah. And it exploded, and it was a little bit louder than people had bargained for, and a little bit more spectacular than expected. And I think it basically singed Pete Townshend's hair, and also caused temporary deafness to him. And it's worth the watch for the comedy value. But
you would have thought just being in The Who would have caused you deafness.
So that's mine from the 60s. I'm going for The Who. Could have had the Beatles, could have had the Stones, could have had Jimi Hendrix or James Brown, whatever. But I'm going for The Who with the explosion at the end.
Well, I've tried with all mine for ones I actually saw with my own peepers.
Well, you don't go back as far as me, you see. That's the thing.
I don't go back to the 30s. So, because I would have included things like the Beatles, etc. But I've included things that sort of, when I saw them, I was like, oh, that's ace. So my third one, middle of the table, another Jools Holland performance by a man with a beard and a hat. And that is Seasick Steve playing Doghouse Boogie. I think it was 2006. But it's
I think I remember.
It's just raw. It's just very raw. And he's got a 3-string guitar, a Mississippi drum machine, I think he calls it. I think it's just like some old tin thing that he beats his foot on. And it just makes me think, when I first watched it, I was like, what have I just watched? I think I've just watched a hobo on live TV performing amazingly. And I think it was more the fact that it takes you back to a bygone era of, and I know I joked about it, and I think you were around in the 30s, but that early blues sort of period, that Robert Johnson, all those sort of people, how they must have improvised drums and guitars, and there's just something about that performance that just makes you go, what have I just watched? That was amazing.
Yeah, I remember that one. There was something about it, got everybody's attention in the studio, didn't it? And lots of people were riveted by it.
Yeah,
it was primal stuff, and
I think that's the best way to describe it.
And you did feel a link back across this history, back to that early Delta blues period. It was like it was coming out of decades ago. It was like a time machine almost.
Yeah, there was no sort of backing vocals. There was no big PA and no big lighting rig. It was just a man, a 3-string guitar, and a metal box and a foot. Oh, and his hands, because obviously to play the guitar you need hands. So, but yeah, that's my number 3. Just simply the fact it made you go, "What have I just witnessed?" So that's my mid-table.
There have been some great performances on the Jools Holland show, and I think I'm going to go for one of those as well. And this is one that I did watch at the time it happened, and it was quite exciting. Going back to 2008, and this is Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds.
We were talking about him this week.
Yeah, and you know what it's like on the Jools Holland show. The band's around in a big sort of circle, aren't they? And then they play a little bit at the start of the show, play a little bit of a jam, and then they watch each other, and it sort of heightens the slight competitive element with some of them, doesn't it? That they perform better because they're being watched by all these other musicians.
It's like a gladiator's ring.
Yeah. So Nick Cave certainly rose to the occasion, and he did this song, "Dig Lazarus Dig," and it's just full on high energy. Everybody sat back like, whoa. Yeah, you've got to watch it to believe it. But I didn't know the song at all. But as soon as I saw it, I was just thought, wow, this is
We've been
cool.
talking about Nick Cave this week, weren't we? Because I think it came up from a Neil Young video you sent me, and I said, "Oh, at first glance, I thought that was Nick Cave."
Yeah, he does look a bit like him on that particular video with his shades on.
Yeah, and it's an artist I've never really listened to. He did that song with Kylie Minogue, and I think he does a song about a boat, which is quite poignant. But he's definitely an artist that is on my radar, so to speak.
Okay.
So I will watch that. I'll watch it in the link that will be below.
That's my one. So 2008 Jools Holland show, Dig Lazarus Dig from, let's say, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. So what's
my
your
number
next one?
two? Well, this was very, very tight, Phil. This was a hard decision. This was like saying, which one of your kids do you love? And I'm like, more. Not which one do you love, because I love them both, but which one do you love more? And it's hard. It's hard to separate them, because obviously I love my vinyl more. No, I don't really, kids, if you're listening. I do love you more. But it's that sort of level of thinking. But I've gone for this one. I've seen them live twice. And his stage performance on Jools Holland, it's Jools Holland again, from 2014, September, I think, is Future Islands, and their rendition of Seasons. And it's just, I say rendition, it's their own bloody song, but Sam Herring, the lead singer, and I think I described him to you when I went to see them at the O2 Academy in November. He's like a history teacher on acid, because when you see him, you think he's come to teach me geography. And then he sings, and you're like, he's obviously swallowed an angel while teaching geography. And then he starts to move.
He kind of looks. He kind of dances as if he's been taught to dance by an Olympic speed skater.
Yeah, an Olympic speed skater who's scared of spiders in a room full of spiders. But he is. The song. It's synth rock. I love Future Islands. I've seen them a couple of times, and I think they're supporting Noel Gallagher on a few gigs this week. But this song, when I first saw it, I was like, he is... Watching him live is amazing, because he's got the voice. He sweats more water than Niagara Falls passes in a second. But he goes from this... His voice is amazing, but his main love, I believe, is hip-hop. But he goes from this soft voice to thrash metal. And during this performance, he is all over the place with body rolling. And, I'll tell you, it makes Elvis Presley look like a collection of nuns, Phil. That's all I'm going to say. If this was 1956, they would have taken him off to sort of get the old witch doctor in, or the old priest, to try and get the demons out of him. But Future Islands, Jools Holland, go watch it. And once you've watched it, you won't stop watching him, because he's possibly in my top 3 of greatest frontmen of all time.
Okay.
And that's mine, Phil. That's my number 2.
Okay, so my number 2, not these are in any particular order, and I'm not saying these are the greatest ever, but they're all quite cool. Number 2 comes from, I think, 1991, or it's early 90s anyway. I must admit, I didn't actually make a note. 1992, okay. And this was on MTV. This was on a show called Hangin with MTV.
I remember that show. Which
sounds pretty down with the kids. And this is a band who, I think this band, they never sold out, really, even when they were, at this point, being their most commercial that they ever were. it's still not really top 40. And this is
What is it?
Sonic Youth, and this is Kool thing, and they just play like they're at a gig, and it's pretty cool. They make a lot of noise, and Kim Gordon spits out the words in her kind of way. And what I just like about it is they play really well. I mean, obviously, Steve Shelley's drumming is completely bonkers, and then at the end of it, they just all sort of fall on the floor and wrestle with each other. And it's just
two for the price of one. Bit of music, bit of WWF.
It's crazy, but it's a great performance, and I think it's cool. It's a cool thing. Sonic Youth, 1992, on Hangin with MTV.
Hangin with MTV, when MTV was about music.
Yeah, I don't know what the M stands for nowadays, but
Mundane.
That could be.
Possibly. I'm just going to throw that one out there. Could be mundane. Don't sue me. So we're on to my last one, aren't we, Phil? A poignant moment in young Ben's youth when I used to stay up late on a Friday. Was it a Saturday? Probably both. A little bit of late night TV, bit of Euro trash, feeling a bit dangerous watching that. And then you'd get Terry Christian on The Word.
That was a Friday.
It was a Friday, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Man in a bath of beans. Mark Lamar, and was it the American Danny Bear, wasn't it? Danny Bear was the other one on there.
She was on it. Katie Puckrick came later.
Katie Puckrick, yes.
And they also had Amanda de Cadenet, wasn't she on there at one time?
Amanda de Cadenet was on there, yeah, she was.
It was, for me, it was a get in from the pub and watch The Word, because wasn't it on about 11 o'clock or something like that?
About 11 o'clock, yeah. It was that sort of era of great weekend TV. But, once you got past 10 o'clock at night, things like Channel 4, BBC 2. I mean, kids watching this now will be like, you only had 4 channels. How did you survive? Well, we did with programmes like The Word. And my best live performance, as I said, Phil, it was hard between this one and the Future Island ones. But as you know me, I'm a massive fan of one particular band. I think they got me into listening to a lot of other stuff like the Beatles, Stones, Kinks, Small Faces, and probably, shaped my musical landscape more than any other. And I remember this one Friday on, I think it was it April 94, March 94. I think it might be an end of March. I remember it wasn't long after my birthday. And it was the mighty, the epic, the maybe, never, soon, possibly, definitely, maybe be reunited Oasis and Supersonic. And it was just, I just remember watching it and thinking, oh, I like that. And I didn't get into Oasis really till probably early part of 95. But I remember watching it and thinking, oh, this is good. This is, Liam's voice on it it's just perfect. Everything about it. They look cool. They look like me and you. Anybody off the street has just picked up a guitar and gone in there. And you've got that. Remember The Word used to have that sort of really crazy backdrop that they obviously green screened in. Yeah. And Tony's drumming on it as well. I know he gets lambasted a lot, Tony McCarroll, at times for his drumming. I know, one of the reasons he left Oasis was because he couldn't, or Noel perceived that he wouldn't be able to drum the new songs. But it's punky, it's punchy. Liam is just, he's a beautiful man. And I can say this being in my mid-40s to a man who was probably 21 when that was filmed, and say he's a beautiful man and it's a beautiful performance. And it's my number one, Phil. And it tops it because of what they've done for me musically since then as well. But I think with Oasis Live anyway, the fact they'd never moved and generated so much energy was part of the appeal. They didn't have to dance around the stage. Hands behind the back, lean into the mic, have it.
Yeah.
That's my number one, Phil.
When exactly was that?
I'm sure people will probably... It was 94, and I think it was
Was it autumn
end of
94
March time.
or March
No,
94?
I think it was March.
Because
Supersonic
was
was
that
released.
was that the first single, Supersonic?
Supersonic was the first single. It was supposed to have been Bring It On Down, but then Nolan had knocked out Supersonic in the studio. And I think that was released April 94. So I'm thinking we're talking mid March, I reckon.
Yeah,
94.
well, I think that was voted. I think that was voted the favourite moment. But they did some kind of nostalgia show about the word, and that was voted the best musical moment on the word. Of course, the other one, where the other band who made their British TV debut on there was Nirvana, and I think
they did, yeah.
Well, I'm not sure whether they played live on there, but I believe the Oasis one was plugged in live.
I believe it was. At first, I thought not back then, but when I rewatched it, I did think, oh, maybe it wasn't live. But you can tell the way that Liam finishes his lines, as it were, with that sort of angst anger that he does. And yeah, there's, as teenage boys, a lot of boys had pictures of Linda Lusardi, Samantha Fox, or Madonna on their walls. I had pictures of two lads from Manchester. So there you go.
There you go. Okay, so
that's my number one, Phil.
Okay, so the one I've got on my top of my list. This comes from 1991.
Ooh,
and
modern.
Now, I didn't actually see this when it was broadcast because it was only broadcast in America. But I was into this album at the time it came out, and I did actually see this artist on this tour, and this was, and it was the first time I'd seen him. So this is Prince and his New Power Generation, and it was on the Arsenio Hall show in 1991.
From Coming to America, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was Eddie Murphy's Butler in Coming to America.
Yeah, and I think Arsenio Hall was mates with Prince, so he tended to get kind of sort of preferential treatment. He used to go on the show quite a bit, I think, and debut songs on there and things. And on this particular one, for the promoting the Diamonds and Pearls album, Prince basically brought his tour to the studio and performed more than one song throughout the show. And it was basically like a mini version of his concert tour in the TV studio. And I've chosen this because I think it's just a great example of his showmanship. And I remember seeing this tour a few months later. And the one, I think he does Purple Rain, he does Cream, and but there's also a track, a not particularly notable, not album track, called Daddy Pop, which as a song is not necessarily anything amazing. It's okay, funky kind of song. But the stage performance of this is just astonishing. There's the dancers, and then Prince comes on and jumps off this stage riser with these guys and he's dancing, and then he ends up dancing on a piano and jumping off a piano, and it gives you an insight, tragically as well, it gives you an insight into how Prince died, because it was because of all this jumping on and off things that he injured his hips, and that's how he ended up on painkillers. So there's
for a man as tall as Prince was, jumping off a piano is quite a high bar to jump from, isn't it?
I saw him 4 times, and I can tell you that he was not big. He really was.
He's not
a tiny guy.
Was he about 5'3"?
I think something like that. Yeah, he was not big at all, and even with the high heels on. But extraordinary performer, a one-off. And it's worth having a look at the Arsenio Hall show, because if you've not really watched much of Prince before, it gives you an insight into his showmanship. So I've gone for that one.
Well, we discussed on one of our many chats Prince not long ago, and I did say I need to probably listen to him more to appreciate him a bit better. Really,
we'll get you in there. We'll get you into the cult.
Yeah,
it won't take long.
I can do that. Hopefully not, Phil. Hopefully not. I've got a backlog of stuff to listen to, but I will get round to it.
Okay, well, those were our fabulous 5 TV performances. Have a look at them in the comments. We'll stick the links down there. You can watch them and tell us whether you think they're as good as we think they are. And join us next time. Don't forget to like us, subscribe to us,
Subscribe
and share us.
and share it to all of your friends, and even the ones that you don't like.